it's very much about signposting where the opportunities are, making sure that people have the tools that they need, and also understanding where the difficulties are and what we need to do about that, whether there's some barriers that they're seeing through regulation and we need to talk to the MHRA, which is the regulator in the UK, about it, or whether there's problems through the tendering process and we need to communicate that with the NHS.
Hello and welcome to the Sustainable Healthcare Podcast. This is the show where we share tips, tools and tactics about how we might decarbonize the healthcare sector. And this is the first recording we do after the summer vacations in July and August on our part in Green Innovation Group. And those news have been quite dark, to say the least. We have forest fires in Southern Europe. We have ocean temperatures that are rising in a very worrying degree. We have some scientific reports that suggest that the Gulf Stream might actually stop in 2025 to 2095, so a relatively short spectrum of time. Then it's the Earth Overshoot Day today, and the UN Secretary General has baptized this period the period of global boiling. So we are no longer in global warming, but it's global boiling. All of that, depressing as it may be, my name is Frederik van Deurs. I'm the CEO of Green Innovation Group, and I'm really happy that you're listening. Hopefully we can help work through those emotional traumas that it is that the climate change is actually happening right now. A few of us have been screaming that at the top of our lungs for years. And on that note, I'm really excited to have Addie MacGregor with me in the studio, in the online studio, you could say. You're still in the UK, I'm in Copenhagen. Addie is a sustainability professional working with ABHI, a members organization in the UK that helps organize the health tech sector in the UK. And Addie and I have had a conversation about sustainability in the sector, and we share a lot of viewpoints into that. So I'm very excited that I get to share this with all of you, dear listeners. Wherever you listen to this podcast, please feel free to like, share and comment. Last year, we were one of the top 5% most shared podcasts on Spotify. So that's all thanks to you. So please feel very free to share this content wide and far. We provide this so that all of the insights that we build up in our work can come out and actually provide leverage for all of the good people that we don't get to work with. So without further ado, Addie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. I've been waiting for this for a while because I got introduced to your work at a conference in France where your colleague was presenting the slides about ABHI, and the sustainability efforts that you're doing and that you're helping your members achieve. And he was super humble and polite in saying a lot of this work is really due to my colleague Addie. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here in France on that date. But that was kind of the cliffhanger that I got in being introduced to you. So you definitely did deliver on the promises in our first conversation. So I'm really excited to have you on the show. Maybe first off, Addie, all of these terrible news in terms of climate change and the realities catching up to us, how have you dealt with this summer?
I think the news has been difficult to watch. For those that work in this area, such as you and I, it's not necessarily surprising. I think the warning signs have been there for a long time. And yeah, many people have been shouting it, but obviously not enough people have been shouting about it. Personally, just keep doing what I'm doing and working in the area, and you can only do what you can do. And I think that's the kind of mindset that I have towards it, so as to not get too overwhelmed with just how many terrible things are happening.
Yeah. So you're not kite surfing in front of the forest fires around Rhodes?
No, not quite.
Some of those videos going around, I don't know if I should laugh or cry, to be quite honest, but it's quite dire.
Both, probably.
Actually, a client of ours has two siblings one living in Sicily and one just getting evacuated from Rhodes. So you know, for this person, it's just getting very, very real. That you know we do have to act. We do have to act faster, and we also I have a very strong feeling that we do need to call inaction out. We do need to call delayanism out more actively, and you know, of course, keep on doing our jobs, as you also say that if we get so sick and tired that we get too stressed and depressed to actually do our work, then that's even less impact that's happening. But I also have this mixed feeling that we also need to call out that it's no longer climate denialism, it's climate delayanism that's going on. And a lot of the time it's, you know, fixing things on the third decimal is not going to cut it. We need very significant carbon reductions. So that's something on a personal level that I've been struggling with this summer, trying to attend to my family and my loved ones, and also kind of juggling that. What could you call it? Like a creative professional problem, and how do we actually help our clients move the needle even more? I haven't come up with a really great solution yet, but hopefully it's something we can develop and explore together with our clients. But back to you. I was wondering, Addie, if you could help our listeners get a view into what is ABHI and how did you end up there, and maybe start out with folding out the acronym as we talked about in the pre-interview.
Yeah, of course. It's quite a long title. So ABHI stands for Association of British Health Tech Industries. So we are the trade body in the UK, and we cover medical devices, diagnostics, and digital health as well. So it's across the field, really. Hence the title health tech, as opposed to going for med tech or something like that. Our base is over a lot more. And so as the industry representative, we work very closely with our members and many stakeholders in the field.
What is that? Is that like an AstraZeneca as one of the major ones, or what is the most renowned members you have? And
So that's more on the pharma side. So some of the big players in our industry are people like Philips and Medtronic and Johnson & Johnson and those sorts of organisations. But what I think is really important for our industry is that, unlike pharma that has a lot of really big players, our sector is very, very SME heavy, which means that collaborating and things like funding are a lot more difficult for our sector. And I think particularly in the realm of sustainability, it's even more important that we collaborate and work together. I'm probably going to use the word collaborate many times, which I know is often done in this space, but it is super important. So yeah, particularly for our sector being so SME heavy, which also comes with all the things that
SMEs, I'm just
SMEs
going to
have.
stop you there. SMEs, for those that are not familiar with the term, small and medium-sized enterprises. So
Yes,
typically
sorry,
companies that are fewer than 500 employees.
yeah,
And in your case, probably also producing a device or something in the physical realm that is going out into the market? Or do you also have companies that are not producing physical items?
some of those. So our membership, we're over 400 now. About 300 of them are manufacturers in some right. So they are making the medical devices, they're making the catheters and the MRI machines and the wound dressings and orthopedics and all that sort of thing. But we also have members that are in the digital space, and they might be using AI for something, or they've got a technological solution. And then diagnostics as well. So we've got in vitro diagnostics and all of those tests, and then other diagnostics such as CT scanners and things like that. And then as well as that, within the membership, we've also got corporate members. So we've got like regulation consultancies and law firms and other bodies that work in the space but don't directly make things as such or have a product in the same way, like traditional sense. So it's quite a broad membership, and I think that informs our not necessarily decision making, but the direction of our work really well. And it always means that we have a broad scope of opinions and viewpoints and expertise as well, which is really helpful. Yeah, it's really diverse, and it's good to be supported by such a wide network of people as well. And also, just to explain, so I'm the sustainability executive for ABHI, but we cover a broad scope of things. So we've got diagnostic directors and regulation directors and government affairs and market access and lots of other things that we specialise in. And so the role sustainability in the organisation is quite new. So I'm the first sustainability executive. It was looked at beforehand, but it was in the remit of my now manager. But she was also looking after procurement and market access and all those sorts of things as well, and adoption of innovation. So then to add on sustainability was quite a lot. Hence, the association and the board, and I believe supported by the membership as well, saw that sustainability was so important in such a rising agenda that they needed to hire a dedicated resource for it. Hence me joining the organisation, I think about a year and a half ago now, which I think really highlights how important it is.
How many people are you in the organization now?
So we're quite small. I think we're about 16 or 17.
Yeah, okay. But that still means that you being one entire person out of those 16 is still, comparatively to other organizations, have a fairly large proportion that you get to spend on sustainability. I think that's really cool. But also seeing that it still probably feels quite overwhelming to be one person having to deal with a 360-degree sustainability agenda for representing so many different interests in a company portfolio that's so diverse, and also a sector that is so complex as the healthcare sector that really has a lot of regulation that you need to be mindful of, different interests from different patient groups, different interests from different clinicians that work in different contexts, etc. But how do you, as a sustainability professional, when you're faced with this astonishing amount of complexity and also severity of the issues, how do you orient themselves in that? Is there something that you do to direct your efforts and the organization's efforts in a more meaningful way? How do you approach that task?
So it's mainly the direction that the members need most help with, or most direction. As I said, the collaboration in such a small and medium enterprise heavy industry is really important. But I think probably the biggest catalyst and the most focus at the moment is the NHS, so National Health Service in the UK, and specifically NHS England as well. The whole of the UK is dedicated to becoming net zero for the healthcare service by 2045. And NHS England has a net zero supply roadmap. This might have been spoken on the podcast for already. But in order essentially to keep doing business with the NHS moving forwards, you need to follow this roadmap and meet the requirements. So there's now social value questions as part of every tender. And carbon reduction plans are being introduced as a pass-fail into getting into these contracts with the healthcare providers. And
if you want to sell something to the UK Health Services NHS, then the tendering process is having a strict requirement for you as a company to report on your decarbonization efforts.
Yeah.
I mean, that is quite groundbreaking in the overall context of procurement in healthcare globally and in Europe, where we think of ourselves as being quite ahead of the curve. But the NHS is definitely leading the way. So the reality of the work is that the members, they need support in how to address and how to communicate onto the requirements in the tenders on the performance that they're already having. I suppose they also have a need to actually set out to do the work, or do they already know? Are they well enough equipped to facilitate their own decarbonization, or how do you see that?
It honestly varies a lot. I think a lot of my role since I began is ensuring that there is the support available for our members to get there on these journeys. Because again, a lot of these organisations are very small. Sometimes they have dedicated sustainability leads that are experts, have been brought in. Sometimes it's the person that happens to be there at the right or wrong time, depending on how they view it, that then looks after sustainability for the organisation and has to learn how to measure their carbon emissions and understand what Scope 1 and 2 and 3 is, and look at how their business is doing in terms of working on economic inequality and making sure that there's jobs available in the area and training schemes and how they're working with the NHS. So it very much varies. I think I'm very positive about the direction that it's all going. I never hear anyone disagreeing with working towards net zero. I understand that I am the sustainability lead and in somewhat of an echo chamber, but I like to think that's the case across the board. I think with the NHS being the first to nationalise these requirements in procurement in the way that they have, which, as far as I'm aware, is still relatively the only one. I know there are other countries looking at it, particularly in the Nordics. And there are a lot of other countries, and specifically like hospitals or certain areas or certain companies that are really, really advanced in this area. But doing it on the nationalised scale is kind of a first. And we're very aware that the world is kind of looking to the UK and what the NHS is doing and to see how to move forward. With that in mind, it is the first, and there are teething problems. So a lot of my role has been working with members, but also with the NHS and with government, and making sure that what is being asked is attainable and achievable. And again, from their side as well, they're the first to do it. Their procurement leads aren't sustainability experts. They're not meant to know necessarily as a prerequisite for their role, or the way to check whether the carbon reduction plan is legitimate, or what is actually a good question to ask and a good answer to come from that. So yeah, it's exciting and it's very much moving in the right direction. And I think in general it's all very positive, but there have been another teething issues. But there is support available, and just communicating that support is really important. And hence why in this role, I'm very, very aware of how little time everyone has. Like, as you say earlier, like even in my role and dedicated sustainability lead, where to begin sometimes and what areas to look into and which areas to learn more about is difficult to judge sometimes. But I think what is incredibly important to know in this area is there is not a single person that knows everything that there is to know about sustainability in healthcare, because I don't think that would even be possible in any way.
No, and the field is so young that it's still emerging, and that also means that a lot of the data, a lot of the knowledge is still emerging, and we are quite literally paving the way as we bike it, to bring in a new, more sustainable metaphor. How does ABHI work with sustainability? Is there, for the members, before they call you, is there a way that they get a clear direction? Does the organization have sort of a mandate to dictate a direction? How do you work as an organization with sustainability?
So, as part of the association, we have a number of working groups, and so they cover things like market access and government affairs and HR, and then also more clinical areas such as diabetes or cardiovascular disease, things like that. So we have the sustainability working group. Pleased to say it's one of our larger ones as well, and I really emphasise that it shouldn't just be the sustainability leads that are a part of the group. It's going to take organisational change to get in that direction, and try and ensure that it's not even just one person per company that's a part of the group, so that it's not all weighing on one person's shoulders. And through that group, we meet regularly and send out updates and invites, and also send communications that are relevant to the whole of our membership as well. We host a series of webinars. I think we've done about 6 this year, getting experts in to try and concisely get through a lot of information, essentially. And again, another area of work that I'm trying to work in, it's a bit more ad hoc, is trying to bridge the gap between industry and academia and bring universities along the road as well. So every time that I'm approached by a university looking to work, I'll make sure that the membership know about that, can get involved in these kind of workshops. It's very much about signposting where the opportunities are, making sure that people have the tools that they need, and also understanding where the difficulties are and what we need to do about that, whether there's some barriers that they're seeing through regulation and we need to talk to the MHRA, which is the regulator in the UK, about it, or whether there's problems through the tendering process and we need to communicate that with the NHS. I think our strength is in how we're a conduit between industry and academia and the NHS and government and the many, many other stakeholders in the space.
Yeah, for sure. That makes a lot of sense. And I think, as you've touched upon as well, collaboration really is going to be key here, because we're tackling so many new problems. Every time we turn a stone, a new complicated random problem pops its head out, and it's kind of like playing whack-a-mole on just trying to break down every problem that arises, and also keep the mood high at the process. I think that's a fairly underestimated part of working with sustainability in healthcare, that you're going to meet a lot of obstacles and you're going to meet a lot of nays in that process. And that collaborative element is really key in sort of making the work progress towards something that's actually meaningful. And the NHS setting out this direction towards net zero has been quite powerful, and it's something that we see it echo around Europe when we're analyzing the entire healthcare landscape across Europe. We do see most procurement professionals that work with sustainability orienting themselves towards the NHS direction. Then, of course, the sort of collected opportunity to take one uniform direction is quite unique for NHS, that it is the largest single healthcare provider in Europe, and I think one of the largest ones in the world, if not the largest in the world. But so it is a unique situation. In Denmark, it's 5 regions that need to coordinate for only 6 million people. So it's different. It's quite centralized in Denmark by comparison to the rest of Europe still. But the NHS is definitely the one that's leading the way. Everyone's looking to NHS, and hopefully all of the good work that you are pulling out with your members as well can serve as an inspiration and a playbook for other healthcare systems to follow faster with the portfolio of small and medium-sized enterprises that are this landscape of sub-suppliers and suppliers that is just so an insanely complex group of companies to manage and work with, because the entities get so small, as you say, and they do not have 1 out of 16 professionals being sustainability professionals only. So I'm really impressed with the work that you're putting out there. As a final question before we round off, the way that you see it being Addie and being part of our sustainability echo chamber, where we've been seeing this problem coming for a while, have you had any observation in the past 1.5 years about some things we could do as a society or as a sector to fast track decarbonization in healthcare? Is there anything that's just, jumping right into your eyes when you're looking at the overall situation?
Sure. I think one of the things that needs to be worked on further is the cross-sector collaboration, which is a lot easier said than done, as obviously we all work in our sectors, and with most things in healthcare, you're working across the healthcare sector. But I think it's taking learnings from other sectors. As you said before, there's an awful lot of barriers in this sector, and I always feel like the problem child coming along and saying, no, we can't do that, no, we can't do that, no, this needs to change. But there is a lot of positive things happening as well. I think overall, the most important one and probably the hardest to tackle is the behaviour change and getting everyone on board. I think in general, as you say, in the echo chamber, but everyone is on the journey together. But it takes just an inordinate amount of collaboration in order to do these things. Like, for example, if you're looking at wanting to make a medical device remanufactured, that means that you need to talk to the hospital, you need to talk to the medical device person.
Maybe you can explain remanufacturing for those that don't know it.
Sure. So remanufacturing a medical device is where you take the medical device at the end of life and then remanufacture it up to the same level of safety and put it back into the system. So trying to make it into that closed loop, circular economy type thing. That's a very broad definition of it. But so when we're talking about remanufacturing medical devices, it's an area that we've kind of moved away from, particularly from post-COVID and the way that healthcare has been over the last 20 or so years. It's been very much a move to single use, and there is very much a place for single use in safety, but sometimes there is the opportunity to move to remanufacture or reusable. It's just not what we've done. And what I think is really important to clarify is that at no point should there ever be a risk of patient safety, and that all of these things are still highly regulated and will not get through the door unless they are safe enough to be used in a patient. So we're only looking to remanufacture and refurbish instruments to the same level of safety and applicability as a product would be, as just as it came off the shelf, brand new. But so looking into remanufacturing, you need to in-house, you need to talk to your R&D team, you need to talk to everyone really about what you're going to do. You need to change your logistics, you need to change your contracts with the hospitals, you need to make sure that there is liability is known for the product at every step of the journey. And there is some guidance around that, but we're currently asking for some clarification from our regulator as well. The hospital needs to have bins or a place to put it in. You need to get it picked up. We know that waste legislation has actually become a barrier for the industry, which wasn't one that we necessarily thought of, but just like local councils not picking it up because it's clinical waste, whether it's been used or not. And then sterilisation facilities, making sure there's enough infrastructure for that, making sure that it can get back up to the same standard. And that would just be looking at one product, let alone trying to move the whole national healthcare system in that direction. A lot of challenges, but if everyone would start thinking like that, which I very much think we're on the journey to do, but we're not there yet, that would make every step of that process easier.
You're really touching upon one of the most interesting opportunities for the health tech sector in remanufacturing and reusing, reprocessing. We are actually recording a podcast next week, or I am recording a podcast next week, specifically on this topic on reprocessing and remanufacturing of medtech devices. So there will be, for any of our listeners that are interested in this agenda, there'll be an episode coming up soon. And I agree with you. One challenge that I've been confronted with in the journey towards reuse and remanufacturing. Of course, there's the whole liability area that you say. I think there are already some pragmatic solutions to it. I think one of the key problems is for the business model for the original manufacturers and for the ones that hold the patents for the devices, the ones that are deeply invested in the research and development side of things, in inventing new devices and putting them to market. I think that's one of the key challenges, to get the business model to stick together for all parties. Because I don't necessarily think that a company that has optimized for being the best to produce a certain medical device will also be the best one to reprocess it again. I think that might make the reverse logistics too complex. I would be very happy to be proven wrong, but I think it's more likely that we will see someone, a new actor, that specializes in reprocessing, that can take in a multitude of different devices and then figure out which ones they can return with a satisfactory degree of safety to the market, and then take over the liability from the original producer and owner, and then we have a somewhat pragmatic solution to that. But of course this entity would get a lot of very crucial knowledge about how certain devices are put together and what their functionalities are, and that could compromise the original IP of the first IP holder. So I think there's something around the business model and the intellectual property that we need a good pragmatic solution to, for everyone to feel like this is a win-win situation where we just need to move now and make this happen. Where currently I think one of the causes for delay is that the business model and who's winning on what is not super crisp for all of the entities in there, and then again you end up feeling like the problem child that's looking at the whole problem holistically and saying, why are we not just fixing this as a society? It's clearly for the best of all of us, but then certain interests will pull too hard in a different direction for it to feel very feasible to succeed with. But of course, this is something where the forward-looking medtech companies are going to have to orient themselves towards that, because it is the way the wind is blowing right now, after being the market has been screaming for single use for such a long time. And if you do want to future-proof your business, you need good answers on how to address remanufacturing and reuse in your future business, because it is going to happen, whether you like it or not, whether you have disagreements with the approach or not. It's going to take market shares. So you might as well start adopting now and not be a dinosaur.
There are a lot of companies doing that as well. And it is very much moving in that direction. But I think, again, trying not to sound like the problem child, but the challenges that we're trying to overcome are massive. Like, then nothing is going to change overnight. We all need to keep working towards it. And there might not be a lot of solutions right this minute that are certainly scalable. There is a lot of individual solutions, and for like certain products and in certain areas and things like that. But yeah, scaling up the solutions is a difficulty across an incredibly diverse sector as well. But I think what's really important is that everyone's working towards it, and these solutions aren't going to come overnight, but if they did, then there'd probably be a whole host of unintended consequences that came from that as well. So I think really thinking out the full extent of the impact of making these decisions will be, and moving into different models of business, I think it's better. Although there is very much a pressure to move to increasing or decreasing our impact on the planet, it'd be worse if we put a whole load of work into it and then made it inadvertently worse. So I think ensuring that we put in the work and make sure that the outcomes are positive without any other considerations is incredibly important.
For sure, for sure. Thanks a lot for sharing your views, Addie, and for shedding a light on the work that ABHI is carrying out in the UK, and also for sharing the personal angle of not getting too overwhelmed by the tragic news, and just keep on doing what it is we're doing in this field, and not get too demotivated. I think that resonated a lot with me. I hope that resonated with a lot of you, dear listeners. So thanks a lot for listening to this episode of the Sustainable Healthcare Podcast. Please like, share it, comment on it, give us feedback on it. It really means the world that you share the podcast. As I mentioned in the beginning, last year we were in the top 5% most shared podcasts on Spotify. So that's really all thanks to you guys. So thanks a lot for sharing. Thanks a lot for keeping the conversations going and engaging, particularly on LinkedIn. And thanks to Addie for being part of the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers. You have a good one.